Are you unknowingly sabotaging your chances of eliminating noise at extremely high ISOs? There's a chance you are. In this video, I'm going to show you a proven editing workflow that delivers incredibly clean and sharp results, letting you shoot at higher ISOs without worry. Starting with a well-exposed photograph is the first key step, and I'll dive into that later on. So let's assume you've already got a noisy shot you want to edit. Take this one for example, shot at ISO 12,800. It's well exposed, I kept the shutter speed as low as possible, and I engaged the VR. The result is sharp, but there's noticeable noise. Let's edit this and transform it into a clean, sharp final image like this. The first thing before I do anything to this image is I want to run this through DxO Pure Raw. That is a software that removes noise and sharpens up the details. So I'm just going to go to plugins and process that in DxO Pure Raw. And DxO for me is far better than Lightroom AI denoise. And I'll show you in this example how good the results are. So you can see here's a before and after comparison of the noise reduction that DxO Pure Raw has applied. On the left is the untouched RAW file, and on the right hand side of this little preview bar is the result. So you can see the result is really good, especially in this beak here and on these feathers. Just dragging that over, you can see how much noise has been removed and all that detail that has been saved. So my luminance value here, it's quite a high ISO, so I think at 50 it should be fine. I don't want to go extremely high. I mean, you can, but you're going to lose a little bit of your detail in the image. Force details, I'm going to probably drop that to about 25. That's just going to help enhance some of those details. And now remember, when you shoot at very high ISOs, your image will naturally lose a lot of clarity and sharpness through that high ISO and all the grain that is present in the image. So just bear that in mind when you are reducing noise on very high ISO images. I'm going to go down on the menu here, optical corrections. I'm going to select lens softness compensation as probably soft or standard. Going to strong is a little bit high, so I think maybe standard will be fine. And then I'll just check that box there to remove chromatic aberration. So I'll go down to the bottom and I'll process now, and that is going to create a new DNG file for me to start editing on. I used DxO Pure Raw 4 for this edit, and the results are incredible, but version 5 is coming soon. If you pre-order version 5 now, you'll get version 4 for free until version 5 is available. I've added links below if you'd like to check it out, plus a trial link so you can see the results on your own images. So here's the new DNG file, and it looks incredibly clean and incredibly sharp. There is no noise there, and we've held on to a lot of detail in this image. So let's start the edit. The first thing I want to do is just straighten the image. It's slightly crooked. Just going to go to crop and just straighten that. I might just crop in a little bit from the left-hand side and the bottom, just to create more of a better crop for the composition, giving the bird a little bit of space on the right-hand side to look into. I also want to keep quite a bit of space on the bottom because that's going to definitely help emphasize the low angle. Then profile, I'm going to choose Adobe Standard. That's going to give me a nice starting point. And what I want to do first is I'm going to look at this image from a local perspective instead of global. Now what that means is I'm going to target some areas using masks just to balance out the exposure to start with. I'm going to darken this bottom here quite a lot. That's really going to help emphasize the composition, and also isolate that spotlight just to the bird. So that's looking much better there. Just with that one mask there, we've made a massive difference to the image. Now I'm going to look at the contrast in the image. We've got some blacks that are clipped here, but that's in the very dark background there, and I'm not worried about that because it was night time. So I'm going to just raise the exposure a little bit. I might just drop some of these blacks a little bit more just to make them very dark. Look at the whites, let's increase the whites. Now there is a very bright section on the bird here, which I will worry about just now. Let's just raise those whites there. And then I might just add a radial gradient over this section. And then just drop the highlights a little bit there, just to control that very bright area there. I'm fairly happy with the contrast and the brightness on this. I want to still keep it dark because it was nighttime, but I want it to be bright enough so you can see all the detail. There's a small spot here that's grabbing my attention. I'm going to just throw a radial gradient over that, just to darken that little area a little bit. Might just, instead of exposure, I might just drop the highlights. I just want to try and just soften that out. I don't want to create a dark sort of halo around that, so I'm just going to adjust the size of this radial gradient. See there, that's just dropping down the exposure on that little patch of ground there. I think the colors in this image need a little bit of tweaking. I'm going to cool the image down a little bit and then add in some magenta just to get rid of a very slight green cast that the image has. That does the trick there. A little bit of mid-tone contrast using clarity. And then I think the colors are looking quite nice. I'm just going to increase this vibrance just to see what it does. I like what it's doing in the blue of the bird, not so much on the sort of browns there. So I'm going to drop that and then try with saturation. That's also increasing some of the colors I don't really want to enhance. So I'm going to go to Color Mixer. I'm going to drag my mouse over the blue section on the image. And when I say blue, it's more of these very muted blue colors in the bird. So I'm going to increase some of the saturation there. I think I quite like that. And then maybe increase some of the saturation in these yellow colors a bit. But I might just change the hue of that yellow. Just warming that up a little bit. I'm going to try and target the colors that aren't part of the bird. So mainly on the ground here. I want to desaturate them very, very slightly. I'm going to select my subject using the objects mask here. I'm just going to paint over the bird. That has selected the bird pretty well. It has selected some of that background there. So let's just subtract that using a brush. I'm going to make sure auto mask is off because I'm just going to paint that area away there just to get rid of the section on the mask. And then I want to invert the whole mask. So I've just clicked mask 4. I'm going to invert that because I want to select everything else. And then I'm just going to drop the saturation a little bit. Not too much. And I might just cool it down a little bit there just to try and emphasize the nighttime conditions. So you can see we've just change the colors very slightly, but we haven't done anything on the bird. I think that might be a bit strong, so let's just drop that amount there. And then what I might do is I'm going to duplicate and invert the mask to go back to the bird, and then I might just increase saturation on the bird very slightly, just to help that stand out a little bit from that background. Go back to tweak the white balance a bit, make it slightly warmer, and then with some color grading, I'm going to add in some blue to the shadows, not too much. Change this balance here for that effect there. I want to then add a black fade effect, so I'm going to go to my Lightroom Tools preset pack here, which is available for free via the link in the description. I'm going to go back to the mask that has created and just drop down the amount slightly. Just want to slightly fade those blacks, not too much. I mean, there you can see the effect at 200. That's too much there, but just softening those blacks a little bit there. Now, I'm not happy with the blue color in the background, so I want to go back to my mask here that I made of the background here. I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm just going to reset the sliders that were associated with that mask. I'm going to go down to point color, and I'm going to choose this very blue color here, and then increase the range, and then just decrease the saturation. You can see there, it's just that strange green-blue color that I was not happy with. What I might do while we're here is just cool that down ever so slightly. And then I think I'm going to darken the foreground again a little bit more, and then maybe just increase the throw of that linear gradient over there. And then perhaps just tweak the white balance slightly. Maybe just increase the exposure. I'm happy with that. Let's go down to detail. Let's add some sharpening. So, I mean, you can see here at 200% how much detail is in this image, even though it was shot at a very high ISO. I'm going to mask away some of the sharpening. And I'm liking that. Going down to calibration just to increase the blue saturation on the blue primary. And then maybe just drop the hue very slightly for that effect there. I think some of these highlights are getting a bit strong, so I'll drop the highlights a little bit. Color's not looking perfect. I think I'm going back to this calibration. I'm going to drop that hue there a little bit. Maybe just decrease the saturation. Don't want it to be too colorful. I'm happy with that there. And then now what I think I might do is add a radial gradients just to this section of the ground. I just want to darken that very slightly just to create a bit more isolation for the bird and the light falling on it. As I mentioned earlier, getting your exposure right is key to clean, sharp photos at high ISOs. In this video, I show you the common exposure mistakes to avoid for better results.